So parts of a radical. What a radical is this check marky shape that you see here, kind of like a check mark with a line above it. That is what we call a radical. Okay? Now this number that we see inside of our radical symbol, we call that a radicand. A radicand. And then this number, this little number that is above the check mark, that is called our index. Now it's very important that you realize that this number, this 3, is above the check mark. Okay? It's not in front of it. It means something different if it's in front of the check mark, but above the check mark or above the radical is our index. Okay? Now altogether, it is called a radical. So the radicand and the index together is called a radical. Now, what does a radical mean? A radical is the inverse of a power. And if you remember from earlier in the year, inverse really just means opposite. So I'm writing opposite underneath in parentheses. Okay? Now, for example, we talked a lot about how addition and subtraction are inverses because a plus and a minus undo each other. Okay? And we also talked about how if we have multiplication and we have division, those are inverses of each other because they undo each other. Same thing with a power and with a radical. So like x to the third and then a radical symbol, those are inverses. They undo each other. So let's kind of break down what this means with some examples. Our first example, our radicand is 27 and our index is 3. So what this means is, okay, if I have x to the third power and it equals 27, if I were to try and work backwards and figure out what is x, that would be my answer. I'm trying to figure out what number to the third power is going to make 27. That's what this radical tells me. So if I look at example number 2, I have a radical symbol. My radicand is 16. And you'll notice that there's no index up here. Okay? Now, the reason why there's no index is because this is the most common radical that you will see, and we call it a square root. Okay? And what it does is it undoes the power of 2. Okay? So it's really important. If there is no index, you automatically put a 2 there. And sometimes we call it special, and we call it the square root, instead of calling it a radical. Okay? Now again, what this will mean is, okay, we're working backwards of a power. I know that my answer is going to be 16, but I want to know, okay, what raised to the second power made that 16? If we move on, the very last example that we have, our radicand is 98. Our power is 5. So again, what this is going to mean is that I'm going to ask myself, okay, what number raised to the 5th power made 98? And that's really what we're trying to figure out when we use radicals. We are trying to undo a power.